Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about introducing psychology, thinking critically with psychological science. This should be very fun. I hope you guys are as excited as I am to delve into this class. So, what is psychology? At first, you probably think you know, and you probably are correct because if you just rely on your senses and everything that you know and you trust your brain, you have a general sense about what psychology is. But of course, since we're in this class, we need to more specifically define it. I had to ask this question when I was finishing up my master's in sociology. I could not figure out where psychology ended and sociology began, and I didn't really understand the difference in perspectives. And so I had to go to the head of the department, and I was like, look, where does psychology end and sociology begin? And my sociology instructor was like, everything out here is sociology, everything in your head is psychology. And I get that's where they're coming from, that these sciences should be separated, that psychology should focus on the individual perspective, the mind, the micro perspective, whereas sociology is the macro perspective, the social context. But as we're going to see in this class, all these fields are going to blend together. There's no way we can talk about psychology without talking about the influence of the social context. We have to talk about biological factors like genetics, and then go even deeper and ask, how does the social context epigenetically affect our genetics? Somehow our experiences out here are associated with the way our body functions. Experiences out here are associated with stress, which then impacts the way you think, which then impacts your body and increases rates of heart disease and cancer and lowers your immune system. So hopefully what you'll gather from this class is psychology, sociology, history, philosophy, all of these fields are ridiculously complex. But in this specific psychology class, we will take a biopsychosocial perspective in the end, really to be able to look at biological factors, psychological factors, and sociological factors that account for the way people think and their experiences and the way they behave. So a strict definition of psychology from the book is the study of mind and behavior, or again, the science of behavior and mental processes, however you want to think about it. But the way I think about it is, it's what's going on in our head and how is that associated with the way we behave out in the social context, and also the way we feel inside of our heads, like our emotional states, for example. It's very, very complex. But again, I think psychology is really an individual focus mainly. You're really looking at what's going on in the head. But of course, what's going on in the head is associated with the way your body functions in the social context too. So in the end, psychology is very complex. But again, that's why it's a science. That's why it's a field of study. In order to understand people, you have to know everything about how their body works, how their genes, how their unconscious mind is driving your thoughts and your behavior. When we talk later in this class about who's really driving the car, think about your life. Are you thinking about every motion that you make with your body, or does your unconscious mind just walk your body for you? Who's really in power? And so hopefully with this class, you'll have a lot of fun, a lot of questions, but I'm just going to introduce you to this biopsychosocial approach to psychology, to the individual, to the micro processes, and all the factors that are associated with the way we think, the way we feel, our motivations, our drives, our desires, it's very broad. So I'm very excited. Just to introduce this class, again, we have to ask some really fun questions. Like, how are our genes associated with the way we behave, for example? Think about friends. Is it in our genetics? Are we driven to be social creatures? I always joke with my classes, but next time you go to call like your parents or your grandma or something like that, think to yourself, why am I calling them? Why do I just have this compulsion to all of a sudden call my parents or my best friends? Why is my unconscious mind talking to my conscious mind, telling me to go out and find things? But same thing with eating. Your body releases hormones into your bloodstream, which then travel to your brain. Those hormones then communicate with the neurotransmitters in your brain, and then your brain then tells you you're hungry, go to McDonald's, hit up the drive-thru. But that whole process started with your physical body releasing hormones and then talking to your brain, and then your unconscious mind then telling your conscious mind to think about the fact that you're hungry. So obviously, hopefully you see it's going to be a fun, complex class, but how does our body talk to our brain is a really great question. And when we talk about the endocrine system and the nervous system, we'll learn a little bit more about that later on, okay? But again, how are our genes associated, our biological processes associated with the way we feel? Do you ever find yourself like super overcome with emotion? You don't even really know why? Why is your unconscious mind releasing this information to your conscious mind to reflect? Why do we consciously reflect upon our emotions in the first place? Very difficult questions to answer, but those are really cool questions to ask. Why did we evolve a conscious mind in the first place that's capable of reflecting? I feel sad right now. Why do I feel sad? The ability to ask yourself, why do I feel sad, is a modern evolutionary adaptation of humanity. Our conscious mind, this outer cortex that we have developed over, millions of years of evolution, has the ability to reflect upon the way we feel. Other animals have feelings, but they don't necessarily have a conscious mind to be able to reflect upon those feelings, okay? But we do. So why is it that our unconscious mind tells our conscious mind to reflect upon our feelings is a really great question. So I ask this stuff all the time, though. Like, why am I moving my hands right now while I'm talking? How much of my genetics are associated with just basic hand movements? Like while I'm having a conversation, I shrug my shoulders, I shake my head, I flick my hands once in a while. It's not my conscious mind doing that. My unconscious mind is constantly picking up my feet right now so I can keep in step as I'm talking. I don't know why it does this. When you're riding a bike, do you actually think about riding the bike, or do you just ride the bike? Who's really driving the bike? Okay. So again, we're going to delve into some super fun questions like that in this class. I studied sociology for my master's and psychology for my PhD. And so you're going to hear me bouncing back and forth, from the sociology, social context, and how that influences our brains, the psychological perspective. So again, when we ask questions like, how has society shaped our structure of our brain, our cognitions, emotions, and behavior? Now, at first, you're like, how does the social context shape the structure of your brain? One of my favorite go-tos for this is that if you superimpose an American brain and another American brain and you have them do 2 + 2, the parts of their brain are stimulated in the same place. But if you take someone who's from Germany and someone who's from China and you have them do the same exact math equation and you superimpose their brain and you look for brain activity, you're going to notice differentials. Simply learning a different language or belonging to a different culture is associated with our brain structure. When you learn new skills or you go to play the violin, that changes your brain. If you sit and shoot free throws, one after the other, your neural pathways in your brain become super highways, and you actually do become more efficient at playing basketball and better at it because your brain is structurally changing. It's super complex. But then you also have other things like trauma. What happens when someone's abused in the social context? How does that affect their brain? How does having trauma in the social context then become associated with depression? And when you're depressed, your brain activity literally slows down physically. So again, our parenting that we've had in our life, the culture we're exposed to, how much stimulation we have in our life, what type of stimulation we're getting, the information that we're learning, what we're observing, all of this structures our brains in unique ways. And then how our brain is influenced, the neuroscience of the brain is absolutely associated with the way you think. Because all a thought is a neuron releasing a neurotransmitter talking to another neuron. thinking is literally just chemicals in your brain interacting with each other and having a conversation, which we'll talk about a little bit later in sensation and perception. But again, that's mind-blowing stuff. And then think about your behavior. How much has something like gender and gender roles and gender role socialization affected the way you behave? Are men and women and other sexes actually different, or are our differences shaped by our experiences in the social context? So when I ask questions like, are humans the same? That's a very complex question, because if you look at humans by sex, you're going to see that there are some biological differences between males, female, and intersex, but how much do those biological differences actually affect behavior? And what you're going to find is the social context is more associated with differences between sexes than our actual genetics. So when we go to do qualitative and quantitative studies, we can go out and look at some of these things. Very interesting. How are humanists the same? How do we have the same universal experiences, for example? Are there overlaps in our brain structure? Are there overlaps in the way we think and feel, in our mannerisms, in our drives and motivations, and things along those lines? You know, great questions later, like, why do we dream? What's the purpose of dreams? Is it to organize our brain and structure our brain? Or is it, something spiritual? Is it our unconscious mind just randomly shooting off information? Do we need to dream to put our bodies to sleep and give us something to do so we're not bored? What is it, What goes on in the mind of a baby? Why is it that you don't have any memories from when you were a baby, for example? Babies' minds are being encoded with memories, of course, but once you learn language, your categorization system changes. It's kind of like having an old lost language where we can no longer read those symbols. And until we can unlock the symbols, we can't unlock the memories. But once we learn our new language, we have a new system of symbols by which we then organize our memory. So therefore, you can't remember anything like earlier in like age 2, for example. Just more fun questions. Are some people smarter than other people? This is the toughest lecture I ever have to give in psychology, because yes, there are genetic differences in intelligence, but bigger differences are things like poverty. How is the social context in poverty associated with brain development? And again, it's that biopsychosocial approach, because poverty is associated with brain development. It's also associated with nutrition, and lacking nutrition is associated with brain development. And so again, it's this cycle. And so again, that's a darker lecture that we'll talk about a little bit later with intelligence. So again, why is psychology a science? We're going to look next week more in this, of course, when we start looking at quantitative and qualitative research and really going into it. But just as a quick interview or overview, we do just apply a standardized approach that's methodical, that we can replicate. We apply the scientific method to achieve these goals. So again, psychology applies an empirical approach, meaning that it's data-driven, it's evidence-based. We're not just basing everything on intuition. Yes, our phenomenological intuition does influence or bias, however you want to put it, what we're looking to seek information about, how we frame that, how we design it, of course. But again, we're trying to standardize this process, as has been going on for the last 200 years. Just trying to get a standardized, replicable approach that can be peer-reviewed and approved by others to say this is legit, not just we came up with this off the top of our heads, okay? So again, we're going to look and apply observation, experiments, critical thinking, again, just quantitative and qualitative methods that we're going to look at next week. This chapter goes pretty deep into looking at the theories of psychology, and it breaks it down into the early and classical theories versus the more contemporary theories and the modern theories. But as an introduction, of course, we have thousands of years of philosophers trying to ask those questions. Who am I? What's the purpose of life? How does the mind work? Is there some spiritual connection? There's a lot of deep questions that people have been asking for a long time, because we're humans and we're curious, and maybe it's in our nature, something that we all share to seek out information. So again, this is kind of where psychology begins, just questioning the idea of the mind and behavior and how does it function. How do our eyes work? How do our ears work? How do the senses work? Why can I smell really good food? Why, when I smell good food, does it make me hungry? And so an easy way to kind of look at the early psychology is to look at some of the early debates. So of course you have free will versus determinism. And again, we don't have answers to these questions even now. But free will is, how much of our life is choice, our ability to be freely go out, and how much of our behavior is just us doing what we want to do, and how much of our behavior and the way we think is determined. And you guys might think your whole life is free will, but you have a lot of drives that are determined from your biology, like hunger and sex and warmth and comfort and, getting a hug. Getting a hug, you might not think about it. You might be like, that's free will, but it's in your genes, your genetics, your biology are determined to get a hug. Even if you think you don't need people, we all do because we're social creatures. It's built into us. A baby can't grow without social interaction. It can't feed itself. It can't learn. If you lock a kid in a closet, like when we talk about child abuse with a feral child, that at a certain point, that child will never recover, will never fully develop. Okay, so we all do need people. It's ingrained into us. So yes, a lot of our experience, a lot of our drive is determined by our humanity, our biology, and our unconscious mind. But then a lot of it is also conscious. How do you weigh it? How much is free will? How much is determinism? Good question. Another one is the mind-brain problem. And this is the idea of monism versus dualism. Okay, is the brain and the body connected, or are the brain and the body separate? And again, that's just a philosophical thing. Do you have a soul? Do you have a mind? Is the mind kind of like this epicenter that's somehow separate from your body? Or is the body and brain completely connected, as we'll talk about with the nervous system and the endocrine system, the brain and body's two forms of communication? Okay? And then you have the nature-nurture issue. So again, how much of the way you act, behaved, why are you getting married, why are you getting a job, how much of that is just, your behavior, your biology driving you, and how much of that's that free will, conscious mind kind of thing. And so, again, nature is your biology, nurture is that socialization process compounded with your ability to make your own free decisions, okay? And we'll definitely be talking about nature, nurture with the biopsychosocial. Again, when you're looking at nature, you're looking at those biological influences. When you're looking at nurture, you're looking at the social context, plus your own observations and your own cognitions. Some of the early theories, and we're not going to get too hung up on the early theories because whether or not they're still relevant is still a good question. They are absolutely relevant. You're just not going to hear about them too much. But some of the early psychological theories like structuralism, the goal of structuralism was to apply introspection to understand the mind. And so your first proponents for that, which probably is always a quiz question, who are the proponents for structuralism? You have Wilhelm Wundt and you have Edward Titchener. And again, this is the idea of when you go to smell a rose, describe your sensation, describe that processes of thought, okay? And so it's a little bit abstract, but introspection is observing mental and emotional processes. How are you feeling? What was the sequence of feelings? How are you interpreting that smell? Now we know that chemicals released from the rose go into your nose where you have olfactory receptors that are stimulated by specific smells that then trigger a neuron to release neurotransmitters to signal another neuron to release transmitters all the way up to the top of your brain, okay? But back then they didn't know this. So they were trying to figure out that process through introspection. Functionalism is almost like modern neuroscience. What are the functions of the brain? What are the functions of consciousness? How do we classify the brain? And I see a lot of that in neuroscience, the biological structure of the brain, and how does the biological structure of the brain influence you, okay? Here I have a quick chart. We're about to go everything. But again, if you kind of look at the approaches to psychology from nature to nurture, from like a biological approach to an unconscious mind approach to psychoanalysis, to a more conscious cognitive approach, to a holistic humanistic approach of the whole biopsychosocial process as a whole, to behaviorism, how learning occurs through interacting in the social context. These are all the theories that we're going to talk about. Behaviorism, we'll do an entire chapter on this when we get into learning theories. Your main opponents for behaviorism are Skinner and Pavlov. And again, this is when we're going to talk about stimulus response. We're going to talk about classical conditioning and operant conditioning, rewards and punishments. Okay, this is how do we learn, basically. And so we'll get into that a little bit later. I don't want to go too deep into it today because we could be here all day and we'll have a whole week on that. Psychoanalytic theory is really looking into those unconscious processes, those unconscious drives, because again, the majority of your experiences are unconscious. Just because you're awake doesn't mean you're conscious, okay? And that's something we'll talk about a little bit later. And it's kind of a trick question because are you conscious just because you're awake? No. You're conscious like in frames and sequences throughout the day. But most of your mind and body are running on autopilot generally the whole time. You don't really have to do a lot of work here. Humanistic approach is a holistic approach. It's the idea that you can't understand how a car works just by taking apart all of its parts and understanding what each part does. You have to understand what the part does and how it interacts with other parts to make the car run. And then this is a very positive kind of approach to psychology. Cognitive psychology, again, we're looking at the processes of thinking. I think of cognitive psychology as thinking psychology, looking at perception, cognitions, emotions, information processing, kind of looking at the brain as like a computer. We're stimulated by all this information. We then organize and code all that information into schemas or files of knowledge, which we can then retrieve to help us mediate the social context. Cool stuff. Cognitive neuroscience is really looking at the structure of the brain and how that plays a role in cognition and also regulation of the body and other parts too. Evolutionary psychology, looking at humanity across millions of years and asking questions like, why did we evolve to be social? Why did we evolve to cry and feel feelings and be able to reflect? Why did we evolve a conscious mind? Why did we evolve the ability for math and music and language? And then it's looking at like applying that Darwinistic evolutionary psychological approach of survival of the fittest and how, our brain has evolved over millennia as we've, interacted in the social context, which has then, influenced the biology of our bodies. It's super fun stuff. And then, of course, epigenetics. How does the social context influence your genetics? And then how does that influence your DNA, which is very new science, trying to understand how your experiences can influence your DNA. Positive psychology, again, is that humanistic approach to psychology. And so instead of calling it a humanistic approach in modern times, we would call that positive psychology. It's very human-centered, positive. We're trying to help people. We're trying to understand the whole person and everything about them. What makes up that person? How can we help them in their lives? This is when you start delving into the Maslow theories of like self-actualization and becoming the best person you can. A biopsychosocial approach, which is absolutely me. Again, that nature-nurture, biological factors, how does that influence you? How does your unconscious mind and your conscious mind work together to influence you? How does the social context influence you? That's your book mentions biopsychosocial right there in chapter 1. Like before it even mentions anything else, it mentions that because that's going to be a big approach that we're going to take in this class, okay? But again, you can't deny the role in genetics in the way you feel, think, and behave. You can't deny your own personal cognitions in the way you think in it. And you can't deny that the social context, your parents, social norms, culture, dictate and structure your behavior, okay? And then social psychology, again, is that blending of psychology and sociocultural factors. So again, we're looking at just like how do social norms and culture structure our behavior. How does it structure the way I dress, the way I feel, how the emotions I'm allowed to express? How does the social context structure sexuality and what's acceptable, for example? And then we'll look into factors like race and social class and sexual orientation and gender and other forms of difference in social stratification, and how those divergent experiences influence the way we think and behave, the way we talk and feel, and the actual structure of our brain too. So we're going to go deep in this class. To wrap up this chapter, your book gets into some of the careers in psychology. Again, a lot of us work in education, in healthcare, government, private practice, consulting. You can work in a lot of areas. So for some of the mental health professionals, you have clinical psychologists, people with PhDs. And then you have psychiatrists who work more with medicine. Clinical psychologists are going to do a lot more therapy. Psychiatrists are going to do a lot more medicine. Psychoanalysts are going to be delving into those unconscious processes and feelings. You have your psychiatric nurses that help out in these. Then you have your clinical social workers and psychologists with the master's degree and sometimes a PhD that definitely engage in a lot of counseling and therapy. And then you have your criminal justice side of forensic psychologists also. Next time we're going to be delving into applied and basic research. We're going to be looking at the scientific method and sampling and quantitative and qualitative research methods, ethical things and things along those lines. So I wish you all the best, and if there's anything we can do, please let us know. Have a great day.